Thank you for listening to e-commerce insights presented by atmosol. We hope you have learned something new or took a nugget of information away to help you as you travel the world of e-commerce. Until next time. Welcome to e-commerce insights, trends, tips, and lessons learned, sponsored by atmosol, a leading e-commerce technology company based in Chandler, Arizona, and Dallas, Texas. Each month, we talk to e-commerce entrepreneurs, vendors, and experts who share their expertise, experiences, and thoughts about navigating the ever-changing world of e-commerce. Ready to get started? So are we. Join host Ram Mohan and co-host Honey Olson with today's guests.
Hi, welcome everybody. So today we have some guests that we're going to talk a little bit about two important things in e-commerce. First will be UI, UX, and web design and development, and the ongoing and ever popular headless commerce. So we're going to start today off by introducing our guests. So Kevin, we'll start with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Honey. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me today. My name is Kevin O'Brien. I head up partnerships for a company called Shogun. And Shogun is a storefront company for e-commerce merchants that want to be able to develop world-class websites and grow their revenue. And we'd love to work with our partners like Atmosol and others to create really excelling e-commerce experiences. So it's great to be here.
Great. And Jorge?
Hi there. My name is Jorge Garcia. I'm a user experience and a UI designer at Atmosol. And I have a passion for design. My experience is in various facets of user interface across, video games, web apps, and e-commerce. And it's a real pleasure to be here today to share my passion about UX.
Great. Ram?
Hi, I'm Ram Mohan. I am the CEO of Atmosol. My experience is primarily in technology across a variety of things. I've done e-commerce, I've done SaaS, I've done web building. In my previous life, I ended my technology career as a enterprise architect. So variety of technology stuff, and now I manage a lot of things at Atmosol. So different hats at different times.
Okay. And I'm your co-host, Honey Olson, also from Atmosol. I am the director of operations. I've been with the company for 12 years and pretty much have lived and breathed e-commerce for the past 12 years. So, all right. So like I said, today we are going to talk about UI, UX and web design and development and headless commerce. So with the ever-growing e-commerce world, there's different topics, but for today, let's focus in on those things. So, Kevin, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about what is headless commerce, because not everybody may know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in traditional merchant e-commerce experiences, the platforms are always providing sort of a storefront experience. And headless is when a merchant or an agency would want to make the decision that, I want to be able to have a lot more control over the shopping experience of my website. I want to have, more ability to do really engaging and immersive experiences, or it may just be, I want a real fast-loading website, and I want to be able to leverage technology to do that. And so the concept of taking your e-commerce storefront off of a platform like a BigCommerce or Shopify and then running it on a different piece of technology is called headless, and it just works through the SDK and API layers of the commerce backend. And so you do see a lot of merchants nowadays who are really trying to explore that area and really leverage that to be able to create a lot more personalized and customized shopping experiences for their website.
So will it work on any platform? I mean, or is it all by itself?
Well, when you create a headless storefront, you're basically communicating with the different platforms through their APIs. So if the commerce backend that you're working with has APIs to be able to talk to and get product data and get inventory data and things like that, then yeah, you could use a headless approach for that type of solution. I think one of the, in the past couple of years, there has been a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around headless. And then I think it also led to a lot of confusion around headless when you start getting into headless, then you get into composable, and then you get into microservices, and the conversation gets pretty technical pretty quick. And so I think merchants are looking at really trying to rise above that and say, what are the problems that I need to solve on my shopping experience, and which headless solution can help me to do that, and which approach can help me to do that. A lot of times they might take that on themselves if they have a highly technical team, or they might work with, someone like yourselves at Atmosol to be able to answer those questions for them.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that.
Yes,
coming from a background of doing web development outside of e-commerce. So if you think of any other product that you use as a SaaS product, a lot of those was built by a front end and a back end, right? So you write a front end using any JavaScript kind of technologies, and a back end using some other technology. The only, I guess, when e-commerce was built in the early stages, they were built as one single system. So a Magento or a BigCommerce or a Shopify, they handle the front end of it, which is what you see, and the back end of it, which is where merchants go and enter their products, etc., which worked well for a while. And once people started asking for much more immersive experiences, so to speak, like, Honey, we've had a client who wanted to have a product configurator that automatically rotates, and as you add things, it shows that up. Things like that became harder to do on, it's not something that's predefined in a system. So if you wanted to do things like that, then it becomes, it's easier if you took a technology like a React or something else, and then you just build that yourself, use an API to plug back into the backend system, right? So, and the backend system, it could be anything to answer the question you asked,
right.
except that it has to support APIs, right? If there's a system that doesn't, then obviously you can do a headless on that. So that's kind of my view from coming from, I always say headless is new to e-commerce, but if you think of that as headless, I've always run headless in all my life, and now it's a new concept in e-commerce. So.
Right. Okay. So would you say then that when it comes to headless, it's a better experience for UI UX?
I would suggest that would be a much better experience. It does allow user experience designers and designers to put together solutions for any inefficiencies that you might run across on the client side, and through improved user flows, we can assist engineers in building components that are much more engaging, much more pleasurable, and that will ultimately improve conversion. It's a much more robust way to create solutions, and it kind of provides like an almost unlimited canvas to create new solutions for users.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, if you think of headless being more flexible, of course it's more flexible because you're not limited by any platform, right? You can build anything you can think of that the technology allows you to do. Like if you take a Magento, BigCommerce, all great platforms. I'm not, against any of them, but there's only so much somebody can pre-build into a system and allow others to configure it, right? There's only so much you can do. If you, like I said, if you want a special configurator, no platform builder can think of that in advance. So you have to have something that you build on your own, and that's where headless really becomes valuable. And of course, like Jorge said, it does allow you to get rid of some of the. When you build a generic platform, you have to support everything, which comes with a little bit of bloat, right? So you have to have all this JavaScript to support this and that, even though everybody's not using it, right? So headless does get rid of that as well, where you can just use what you need and not use what you don't. Right. That's kind of my thinking about two things about headless. Now there are downsides to it, which I guess we'll get into soon. But Kevin, I mean, if you wanted to add something to that.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, when you think of the user experience, now that merchants have been doing, e-commerce and online commerce for so long, they're starting to think about and want to be able to do more from a personalized shopping nature, and that's something where React certainly makes it a lot easier to be able to do that. Whether people can take the quiz and then really present really rich imagery of which makeup or lotion solution that they might want to have. I would say we had a client who wanted to be able to do branded air tags, right? So they're in a very competitive business, right? They're in the Apple accessory business, and they wanted to be able to, have a really cool looking branding element on their site when you're buying the air tag for your pet, right? So that's something that, harder to do in sort of some of the theme systems and easier to do with React. And that's some of the UX stuff that I think really can come through with Headless.
So for Shogun's Headless, Kevin, does it work with any platform?
Good question. So right now, our Headless platform is called Shogun Front End. And we actually took a little bit of a different approach than a lot of the other headless solutions in the market, where we developed it as a merchant-focused solution. So we thought about what are the problems that merchants are trying to solve from their website when they want to go headless. Things like the ability to easily publish new pages, the ability to lock down branding elements, but still have control over their pages. Really sort of enabling the merchant to have a lot more control than some other developer-focused solutions can do. So we call it a unified platform. It still produces a lightning fast, progressive web application. And right now it works on the Shopify, the BigCommerce, and the Magento platforms, and we'll be looking to extend to more platforms in the coming year. But I would say that those ecosystems right now, a lot of those merchants are starting to explore headless solutions for their storefronts, and so we've seen some great success there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think which leads us nicely into the downside, which Kevin brought up a little bit, right? About if you are building a full headless, right? What are the downsides? One of them obviously is that, like you said, if you have your own team, you need to make a change. You need somebody who knows technology to make the change. You can't just go in and even edit content most of the time, right? So I think that's something that you want, and if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more on how Shogun solves the problem. But I think
that's great. I actually look at the merchants. I actually put them in three buckets, because it's like there's merchants who is, let's say, 250 million and above in GMV. They have all the resources to be able to have their own in-house team, be able to really get selective on technology, and they kind of run it independently. And then there's sort of these 10 to 250 million, where it's a mix of the merchant really has to decide, can I staff and resource this team internally to be able to manage a headless implementation, or I would work with a partner or an agency like Atmosol to be able to build and maintain that solution for me. And then sort of the 0 to 10 million GMV, I would say those merchants really have to spend a lot of time thinking about, is going headless going to deliver me the benefits that I really need at this time in my business. So that and that kind of leads to some of the things that merchants need to think about when they're going headless, which is it's gonna take a while to build a site. You're basically building a whole new storefront from scratch, regardless of which platform you're using. In the Shogun front end solution, as Ram was saying, when the store is actually built, it actually has a drag and drop user interface, so that the merchant has control over the visual representation of the site going forward, which is unique, a little bit unique in the market. Most headless solutions don't provide that to the merchant. And we also make it so the merchant's only managing one piece of the technology stack versus having to manage 4, 5, 6, 7 different pieces of the technology stack. And so that's why when we take a merchant-focused approach, it makes it quite a little bit easier for the merchant to manage that going forward. But certainly there are development costs, whether it's internal or external. There's timelines to build the site, and then if the merchant, I think, and Rob, you probably have some thoughts on this too, that revenue-wise for the merchant, they really have to be, if they are under 10 million, they really have to think about, do I want to put the resources here at this point in my business, or do I want to live on the liquid or the stencil themes that I'm on now, and maybe move to it later on as a business.
Yeah, I mean, I think if for a 1 to 10 million merchant to go headless, I think they really have to have a unique product that only works with that experience, right? I mean, if I was building something that's totally wizard based, the only way to get to the end is a wizard, then I have to do it. I mean, there's no other go, right? And so is certain products which are, many companies selling only one or two products. So to get that website to be more immersive or interactive, sometimes they want to do some things that are special, so that as you go to the website, it's not just like, here, buy two products, right? I think so. So those are the kind of merchants I can think of going that way for a smaller merchant. But yeah, as you get a little bigger, then definitely the market is demanding more immersive experiences. I mean,
Right.
it's I don't know what Meta is doing, but nobody knows. But hopefully, but at least they think something's going on in that immersiveness, right? So
Right.
if it's not VR, it's AR. Well, one of the two, something is going to, just move. The world's moving that way. So definitely, headless is going to be more and more rather than less and less. But yeah, there is the disadvantage that you do need a tech team. You can't just set it up, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and we haven't touched on the benefits of page load time. So certainly most headless solutions make your page load times a lot faster. Like in the Shogun solution, we actually produce a bunch of flat HTML files, which are able to be quickly loaded and quickly navigated through and so forth. So you get really high engagement with the website because people aren't waiting for the pages to load. And there's other examples of that, but I think one of the cautions that we would make to merchants is like, speed alone can't be the reason for you to go headless, because it is going to require a lot of attention from you as a business to actually implement it. And so you really want to be doing it for the shopping experience and getting the benefits of speed that come with that as well.
So is the ongoing maintenance of a system built on headless, is it better? I mean, once you get past the implementation, or is it always going to be a high maintenance site?
Well, in the Shogun world, it's not a high maintenance site, because once the solution is built, it actually comes out as a drag and drop visual experience manager for all the components, all the sections on the website. And so the merchant actually has a lot of flexibility and a lot of control over what they can do. There are other headless solutions where, you still do have to engage directly with your technology team to, put a new banner up or put a new landing page up or things like that. So that's one of the questions, is people are really, trying to determine which headless implementation they want to go to. You really have to look at what are the workflows that you as a merchant want to be able to have, or once this site is launched, and make sure that the technology you're going to be implementing can support those workflows, so that you don't necessarily have to be waiting on developer timeframes to do changes to your website.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the midway, I think, and Kevin, I'm going to jump a little bit into Shogun. If I'm talking some nonsense, please do stop me. But from my experience on Shogun and what I've seen, it allows the team, as you develop it, to say, okay, certain portions the business should be able to manage, right? So you allow them to edit or change that. Certain other things, yes, it needs to the developer if you want to change that, right? So, and that's a decision upfront, and that's great, because then you're both working together to decide, okay, what are the things you'd want to change in future? What are the things that are not changed so often, so that's okay to have a developer do that, right? That's I think a very good in between, where you're not building the entire whole shebang just to have one thing, right? So like I said, the platforms have to support every scenario they can think of, making it a little bit more bloated, versus something that's only my stuff that I can build at every time you need a developer. I think it's a good mid path. You're going to be able to change these things, go to a dev and have them change it. It's, my opinion is, it's valuable to everybody, but yes, there is a cost to it. Right?
Yeah. And again, it all starts with the workflow, right? Like what's the expected workflow that a merchant wants to have once they're managing their website, and then the site gets built towards that workflow, and they're off and running.
So when you're talking about workflows, I mean, Jorge, how would UI UX fall into working something like that? I know there's workflows when you're putting together your wireframes and prototypes and talking, how does the client want this down the line, and you were talking, Ram, about the need for a developer versus, letting the merchant be able to do it itself. I mean, I'm sure all UI UX falls deep into all of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the major costs that, or things that you want to pay attention to when going into a headless build is that a vast majority of the user flows and interactions that were built on the front end initially may need to be revisited, and they may be customized for a new set of user flows.
Gotcha.
Because platforms tend to handle a lot of that will need to get revisited, creating new wireframes, creating new user flows, maybe conducting interviews, talking to clients and admin users to find out what kind of new functionality, what kind of new custom components you might need to build. That's generally the time you're going to do it, and that would be the best time to start incorporating more user experience design, focusing on your user interactions, and then of course starting to build some of those prototypes and sharing those with the team. So there is some UX development time that's put up front when you're moving into a headless solution. So there's quite a bit of work there to help create some pleasurable experiences for users.
Okay. So whether it's headless or not, what would be the most important factor that someone needs to look at when they're looking at the UI UX side of doing their sites?
In the context of e-commerce solutions, I think that, in our experience, especially at Atmosol and across a lot of e-commerce, you see that a vast majority of time generally wants to be placed in the core user flows that you're going to be experiencing in a store. So, a client might have expectations about what a visit to an online store will entail, what kind of things they should have access to, and of course, what prior experiences in other stores may have established for them to be acceptable user flows. You want to make sure that those are included, that they're not deviating too much from what's expected from users, but it's also a customized experience that makes a user want to engage with the store and promote conversion.
Okay. So Kevin, with the drag and drop interface, does that make it easier when you're starting to think about, the UI UX and the design and the workflows?
Yeah, I mean so the UI UX really is all part of that process when the page is getting built, and it's but the drag and drop gives them the ability to maybe move holiday messaging in between two banners, or move the carousel up or down, or put special delivery messaging for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? So the users can drag those around, and then they can also just upload upload their images directly into the interface. So the interface would be built to support certain types of rich media. They can just upload them directly onto our platform, and then we optimize those, and they get hosted along with the website. So once the UX has been determined for that website, then all of a sudden, changing out images and adding new sections to it becomes a lot simpler than it might be in other ways. And people that are on, drag and drop is not a new concept, right? It's been around 20 years. It's just making that merchant accessible in a headless environment is something that is still sort of, the tip of the spear, so to speak, versus other solutions that are out there. So that's why it's really important. We have another non-headless product that's done drag and drop for 8 years. In a different approach, and merchants really want to have that control, I think, at the end of the day, to be able to quickly make changes to their website, so they can run efficiently and effectively for their seasons.
So when you're thinking about your user interaction and experience, is it a one and done? Like, you put up your designs, you develop the site, and it's over, right?
No, not necessarily. I think, and this is something that I've always really appreciated about Shogun, is that it does incorporate a lot of user experience research techniques. They do have A/B testing, and I think that that's something that expands into a lot of really helpful data that you can use to design and brainstorm new solutions for users. Generally speaking, a lot of the data that you're gathering and a lot of the research that you're doing can be used to incrementally improve experiences for users. So it should be approached as an ongoing project and an ongoing task of identifying inefficiencies or identifying any facet of a user flow and finding new ways to make them more efficient and to promote higher quality conversions and more conversion.
Okay. So nobody should just jump on trends then?
I think it depends on what that's going to be. If it's a user design trend, sometimes based on on the field that you're working with, it might be important to maintain a look or an aesthetic that is very current. But generally speaking, especially for a larger installation, a larger store, approaching some different changes like that might require a little bit of research and making sure that the cost and benefits are going to balance out.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about trends, right? So, I've always thought about this a little bit, because if you think about the current modern websites, right? Forget about e-commerce for a second. Everything's big, right? There was a time when there was an entire discourse about saving real estate, right? We need all this real estate. When we came from the desktop world, we need all this real estate. We can't make things big. Let's keep them small. From there, now we've gone to, if you look at most web pages now, they're many times even, obnoxiously big, right? I mean, it's like humongous buttons, like, I mean, I get it. It's easier, but I'm just saying that trends might take a little time to bake in, but once it's baked in, users expect that. I mean, I guess my bottom line is, as designers or as builders, I don't think we decide what is right and what is wrong. Once, if a user likes something and he thinks that's the new thing, that's the trend, then sometimes you have to go with it, or you look like that guy probably built it in 1990, so I'm not going to go with that guy.
You mean no one wants a push to cart button versus an add to cart button?
Exactly. At the time, it was it was good and it worked. I mean, there's no reason that it didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as things become more progressive, and especially as we turn more to mobile, how is headless and UI UX and all that going to play into that?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the nice part about headless is that, when there are certain implementations of it, again, like the Shogun front end, which produces the progressive web application, which really provides a really, like, you get like a mobile app experience in the mobile browser without having the mobile app, right? So you're able to really develop a really functional shopping experience on mobile. And again, it runs super fast due to the way that the site is built. And so that is, I think, one of the pushes, again, for a lot of companies that are going headless, is because they do have a high number of mobile shopping that's going on their website. And certainly headless gives them a much more straightforward approach to solving that than some of the theme-based solutions that are out there. Ram, I don't know, you probably have seen this as well in different.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, you can, so with React and with Shogun front end, you can. So essentially, it is responsive, right? That's the term that we use. Responsive basically means when you view it on different devices, it changes its view automatically. You don't have to build. I mean, to give it some history, in early days, if you remember, most websites would have a mobile.abc.com and an abc.com. They built them separately, right? Yeah. And then came responsive with, I think Twitter started it, or one of the larger companies gave us Bootstrap, and then it came up with that. But also, to add to that, it's not just about responsive website. If you're doing React, in fact, there is actually something called React Native. So what React Native does is it allows you to build an app, not just a responsive website where you can view it on a website on the mobile, but a real app on your mobile using the same technology. Now, granted, you can't just take the web code and put it there, but there is a lot of commonality. And number one, you can reuse a bunch of it. And number two, you have now people who are working on the site, they can do the same things. A single technology across multiple devices in multiple forms, that's one of the powers of React. Now, even if you go Angular, there are others that do that, but that's what modern technology is going towards, where headless will win, is that you can take the same thing. I can see it on my computer, I can see it in a smaller form on the website on my mobile, I can even make an app and reuse a lot of the code and have the same developer or development company do that stuff, right? That's really powerful, and make it fast. Right? I don't have the debt of having a bloat of JavaScript, which is why Headless is going to be there. But now, I mean, like Kevin was saying, and Shogun was trying to solve some of the problems of, eventually, I think it'll get solved, that the best of both worlds. You have the speed, you have the technology, as well as the ability to change the things that business wants to change, right? I mean, not everything is business change, so it's going there. I think it will get there. And for the mobile view, like, I need to answer your question. It's a good thing that it's going to get better and better as we go along for that mobile.
So are there certain industries or verticals that work better in using Headless, or is it just pretty much anybody?
That's an interesting question. There are certainly some industries that are taking more advantage of Headless from what I've seen. Things like health and beauty, high fashion, jewelry, accessories, things like that, where really trying, like you guys had mentioned, really trying to provide the 360-degree view of a product, which you care about if you're buying a high-end watch, but you may not care about it if you're buying a box of food or something, right?
Right.
So there are definitely certain industries that we've seen that are taking advantage of Headless ahead of others. And it typically comes around creating that unique immersive experience, almost like you can feel the product coming through the website, so that they can really kind of get an attachment to it. And so, yeah, that's what we've seen. Now we've got plenty of customers that are in B2B, B2B sales or electronics or other things that are finding great benefits from Headless. But I think the early adopters have definitely been those really kind of immersive kind of fashion, jewelry, and wellness sites.
Yeah, and I think even the cost matters, right? If it's a higher priced item, I want to see know more before I buy online. In a store, I can go look at the watch upside down, but here, if I just show you something I'm not convinced of, I'm spending $5,000. I better be able to see it properly. So that's definitely there. If Honey, I may, just wanted to talk a little bit about, Jorge mentioned it briefly, but I want to talk a little bit about conversion as well, right? So it's kind of like the holy grail of commerce. You can do all the stuff, but if you're not converting, you're not doing anything, right? So
something I think that's helpful to touch on is the freedom that you get from decoupling your front end from your back end allows you to start using different libraries, different architecture builds, and of course, with the research and the UX that you'll perform when you're going with the Headless build, you're able to build customized solutions for specific user types. And this is great for e-commerce because any successful e-commerce implementation generally thrives best when the store can fulfill the expectations of a user. And when it comes to stuff like Kevin mentioned, jewelry, electronics, anything that's highly customizable, this is a great time to implement something like a Headless solution, because now you have potentially a limitless options for how to approach solutions, how to approach inefficiencies, and how to create solutions for them that start with a user-centered design mentality. What that'll do is both, again, will help with conversion, but it promotes engagement, and it's a positive form of engagement that makes people want to keep coming back. And ultimately, it provides both, great user experiences, conversion, and then the data that you need to keep on delivering those types of solutions as you see new models appear. It just gives you the freedom for a lot of that, which is, it's really great for UX people, for designers, and for developers as a whole.
So what if, you're in the GMV that you're talking about, that, Headless is just not going to make it for you? Do we still have these possibilities of building, UI, UX, and personalization for good conversions?
I believe a lot of that's dependent on the platform. certainly when you have a headless implementation, you're going to have more freedom as a result of the decoupling of those two elements. But every platform will have its own unique set of options that you can utilize to, you can still design solutions, you can still design user flows, but they will be sort of housed within the functionality, the framework that's provided by the platform. And that's why this sort of headless solution is so exciting. Although we have been initially, or for the longest time, working within these parameters, within parameters of any specific e-commerce solution, now we can use those backends and then provide new solutions and then tie back into the backend through the use of APIs. Ultimately, you still have a range of freedom within all these platforms, but based on the type of industry you're in, you may want to provide more. And as you start gathering that data, you start gathering those user stories, you'll see that many merchants start finding new avenues for generating conversion through customized interfaces and customized components that target the needs of their users.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, you can. So if I take personalization, it's a big thing today in the market is to be able to personalize to each customer segment. If they could, they would customize to each customer.
Right.
But at least to the segment. And if you think about a platform, right, many platforms in the backend do provide customer segmentation and things like that. But how many of the themes are actually using that, right? If you take a theme and say, okay, this is a backend, they don't actually use that very well. Now, you could go and customize that and do something, but then you're limited by that. The platforms, whoever built the original front end of the platform, how much had they thought about? Like I was saying earlier, nobody can think of everything on a platform that's supposed to be used by everybody, right? So that's where what Jorge is saying is that you can definitely do many things on a platform. I mean, people have been doing CRO for ages on all of these platforms, but now your avenues and your horizons are much more broadened because you're not limited by anything. You think that Honey is a great customer. I want a personalized experience just for Honey. Go for it. Go and build it, right? And that's where that headless gives you that. And to just add to that from my technology background, the other thing that's really nobody touched upon really was that now your releases become separated too. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You no longer have to release the backend in order to release the front end.
Yeah.
So because when you were releasing monolith software, you would have to release everything every time, which is more risky. It could break something on the backend where all you did was change the color of a button, and now suddenly nothing works. And that's a problem. It's a real problem. I mean, we laugh at it, but I've been a developer in my life before, and I've done stuff like that. So it is sometimes, it happens sometimes. So and that's a big advantage that now you can separate your release paths. You could even have things like, say, your backend is only going to be released every 3 months or whatever, depending on your organization. But your front end, hey, feel free to play with it, iterate it, and find the right UI so that is converting the best, right? So that is also another great advantage, I think, of going headless.
Something we experience as well as we're building solutions is that a vast majority of the options you have or what you can do is going to be dictated by the technologies used by any platform. So you may have a team that's engaged in building solutions for a store, but maybe the best solution would be a different library or different architecture. And when you have a headless solution, you have the ability to build it in languages that your team is proficient in, with architecture and models and UX models and flows that a team is customizing for that user base. I think it opens up quite a bit of avenues for both designers, developers, engineers, solutions experts. Everyone has a little bit more leeway now because once you've separated all of those facets, you're able to use your best team members to utilize the languages that are best going to solve the problem. I think this is a really interesting facet of headless that opens up a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and in some ways, it makes it easier to take some components that you built for this customer and transfer them over to another customer.
Absolutely, especially if you have experience building one component for say BigCommerce versus Magento 2, they're very, very different. Same thing if you're doing something for Shopify. The languages they're using on the front end, the way their stack works, the type of data you're going to have access to, and how you can display it, it's very different across the board. When you have something like Headless, your solutions are going to be following much more well-established design patterns and architecture patterns. It's quite a bit more simple to understand and simple to implement across different stores and different clients.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to add a little view to that. Like, if you think about extensions on a Magento or a BigCommerce or any of the platforms, right? So it's a little bit of a inversion of what an extension is, right? So, for example, an extension usually solves a functional problem, right? So you might have an extension for, I don't know, loyalty, or for any of the things that you functionally want in a website, right? Now that's following the same principles of you'll have a backend, you'll have a front end that's built by them. You do that, right? It's not just the platform, but even the extensions. Now, if you take a React, right? React has its own libraries, right? People have built libraries. You could equate them to an extension and say, oh, if you wanted to do a tree, right? And there's NPM, which is kind of the marketplace for that, and you can go there and get a tree for React. Now, the differentiation though is that in React, what you've done is you've modeled the user experiences and the user controls and things like that to be able to use that in any way you want, versus an extension that is again following the same monolith principle and saying, okay, I'm going to build both of these and solve a function, right? So that's kind of where using that modern technology, it still helps you use open source and free code when you need to. You don't want to build everything from scratch. Yeah. But at the same time, not have that dependency of both being built by them and not being flexible, right? So it's I've always looked at those two things and said, it's really even, right? React has, and what the reason I brought this up is React really has a lot of components that are written by people and is available for you to use, right? And you build out of those and use something like Shogun, and you can create a component that you can then reuse if you wanted to. I mean, depending on whether you're building for your customer that you cannot reuse or not, right? I mean, that's a licensing thing as well. But
and it's a real interesting point that you brought up about plugins, because the vast majority of the time, for any established e-commerce platform, a lot of the plugins and applications that you're generally utilizing for a specific subset of their feature set, right? Mm-hmm. There's many times that, or almost all the time, each one of those plugins and apps are using APIs to communicate to the backend in a very similar fashion. And you're only utilizing them for that one thing. When you have a headless implementation, you can build around your needs based on data that you've gotten from user research and kind of circumvent a lot of that, and then target the exact same APIs that will interact with that backend in the exact same way. Then you kind of remove some of the overhead of utilizing those plugins, the cost that might be associated to them, and you might be able to use those solutions in different places. Whereas if you were using that plugin for that specific solution or for that specific store, that same solution can't just be used piecemeal in other places. You'd still need to pay another licensing fee. You'd still have to rebuild and make sure that solution is going to work for that client. I mean, you have quite a bit more freedom in regards to building reusable solutions across the board.
Yeah. When you start to look at it, right, it's more robust, more functionality, less overhead, faster pages, unique customer experience. So I think as merchants are going into 2023, once they get through the holiday season, if they're in that sort of 10 million up range, it's probably a good time for them to really evaluate if they're ready to take that next step to Headless for their website.
Yeah, so, and I think, sorry, honey, but one thing that I think Shogun solves some of that to the PWA. That's one of the advantages of having that. And I can talk more about PWA, but we have the time. So maybe another topic for another thing. But to Jorge's point, there's caching, right? So you could cache, like he was saying, 5 extensions all calling customer data. You don't need all of them to do that. You could cache it. Granted, some of the frameworks, some of your platforms might cache it on the server, but you literally can cache on the front end. I mean, especially if you're using React and there's technologies like Redux and all that. So it really does help in that as well, that you have more flexibility to say, to literally model your flow of data too, right? And that's a big advantage as well.
And ideally, you can also start building your components utilizing some of maybe the ideas from a plugin or from some app. You can build a lot of your components using some of those user flows, but they'll already have, the structure of your existing components, the user flows, and some of the ideas as to in regards to how we're using the user's data, how we're displaying information to them. Ultimately, you get so much more control, and what ends up happening is that you'll find later you're reusing styles, you're reusing framework, you're reusing your scaffolding. All that stuff starts saving time, which ultimately saves a lot of developer time. It starts saving on design and UX time, and it saves on implementation as well.
So, bottom line, it's saving the merchant money.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, it's debatable. I mean, it will. So if you take the long run, right?
Yeah.
What Jorge is saying, I get it that there is an amount of saving to be made by reusing certain things, but you also have to think about the upfront investment. So it's like saying, let me forget about e-commerce and talk about something all of us know. I'm sure each of us have got a call asking us to put solar on our roof, right? So is it worthwhile for you? It depends on your situation, right? So so I did some calculation. These guys, they come and they do a calculation that's so, something's wrong, right? I look at it and say, no, there's something wrong with that. And so I went and did a calculation on an Excel, and I said, okay, it'll take me about 20 years to get that, or 15 years at least, to get that money back from savings on electric, right? Now, should I do it? Well, depends. Am I an environmentally aware person and want to make sure that I'm not, I'm using as much solar as I want? Then that 15 years doesn't matter, right? And similarly, I mean, it's brand too, right? It's your brand. Is your goal right now in the journey of e-commerce, right? Right now is your goal to say, okay, let me, stand up first, right? Before I start running, right? So at that point, they might say, no, that's not the right place. I agree. There is savings to be made 5 years down the line, but am I going to be there in 5 years, right? So that's the question that you're asking. And then if you're at a certain stage, like Kevin's point, 10 million and above, maybe you might say it's a random number, but somewhere in that higher number, then okay, I have to make investments for my future. Then you say, okay, that makes sense for me to make that investment today to make savings 2 or 3 years down the line, because it's not that saving that Jorge is talking about. It's not going to be instantaneous or 1 year or something like that. It takes over a period of time. You will save money probably, right? But again, depends how much of it you reuse, etc. So I mean, I think it's a balanced view. I know that a lot of agencies, a lot of people who put out content say that you got to go headless and that's the thing to be. And I've always said it's up to you. If it is definitely is the future, at some point you will have to do faster sites, and as things get faster and faster, you're going to be left behind, right? But do you have to do it today? I think it is a case to case basis, and then I'd actually recommend it to a client. You don't even have to go full headless. You want an experience of a certain product on one page, just use that as headless. It's not necessary the whole thing has to be headless to have one headless page. So
yeah, and we've definitely had customers under 10 million that have gone headless, and they've done it because they knew that's where they wanted to be, right? They wanted that control and that experience, and they said eventually we're going to have to do it, so we're going to make the investment now. But the reality is most people are making the investment to improve conversions, right? Because of the customer experience, the loading time, right? So it's all about, to your point, Ram, like we've got to improve the conversion of the website. Headless is going to give us the best opportunity to be able to do that in terms of shopping experience, personalization.
I think a lot of it generally takes some research into how much it's going to cost to build within that structure, or to build within those parameters of any established platform, and of course the scalability that you're expecting for a store. If your goal is to improve conversion by creating new user experiences and taking the data that you're getting from those research from the research that you're getting, and then trying to build experiences that will promote engagement, I think it's a good investment. But it does require that you have a plan for it, that you have data and research that's pointing towards the need for that, or that those kinds of solutions will improve your conversion. I do believe that in the future you're going to see quite a bit more of it, especially in the e-commerce area, just because so many stores want to engage their customers that way, and it's kind of expected.
Well, and much like, Ron, we were talking about earlier, people, 10 years ago, if they had a mobile experience, it was M dot,
Right.
So who's to say that 10 years from now, everything's not headless?
I used to turn off my images when I wasn't on a Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So I can't wait for the whole images to load in this.
Oh, yeah. I don't even remember those days.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking when Jorge was talking about, think about it when you're building it, right? How much you're going to save from, how much you're going to spend for this and that. If you're building from scratch, maybe headless is a good way, right? Because you're already going to make an investment on building it in the platform. So why not increase that a little bit? I mean, it's a totally different conversation if you already have a site and you want to migrate. That's full new expense versus, okay, this is the expense for this versus that. That's it. That's a little more manageable, a little more digestible if you're going to do that. And so it also goes to the experiences we've had as an agency. Many times, people will come to us and say, "Oh, I want it on the BigCommerce or Magento. I just want a theme. I don't need anything custom." And as you get into it, well, can you change that and change that and change that? And then you're like, you might have been better off just doing a custom.
Yeah.
That's
by that time, you're so far down the road, and you're just okay.
Exactly. I've already spent so much money. Now I can't go custom, right?
Right.
But that might go into headless as well. That as you go into platform deeper and deeper, you're investing that money. At some point, you maybe should think about it. Should I invest all these things into the platform that is eventually not the future, or should I just cut off and go? Yes,
Right.
It's more money, a little bit more right now, but not. I mean, and when you say more, I want to be careful in saying that too. It's not ridiculously more, or something only a big enterprise can afford. It's not that much more. So yes,
It's not $1 million site.
Well,
it's not
a good way
right?
to
It's
look
not,
at it. A good way to look at it also is if you're building a custom solution, does it, or in Ron, maybe you have good insight into this. It might just be easier to find developers that can build a React app that handles e-commerce on the front end than it would to find a specific platform's certified developers that know exactly how to build that solution you want that happens to maybe not fit within those parameters, but they can make it fit. But how much time is it going to be to do it within those parameters?
It's a good point. I mean, as we go along, one of the things that you need to think about is also who are the people available, right? Resource availability. I mean,
Yes.
You can see today how hard it is to hire people. React, Angular, all of these are generic technologies. You will always find people who can do that. All the platforms are still very specific, very niche. Not too many people know that. I mean, case in point, I got out of college, I knew JavaScript, right? But if you ask me about a Magento, I would be like, what is that? But honestly, it's a niche platform. So that's definitely one thing that you will have more and more people available to do the work if you're doing a React or a headless. Of course, if you're already using a Magento on the back end, then it's kind of a moot point. But this will take us much further, and we don't have the time. But that's where the whole composable comes in. Is that if your backend is also a composable thing, built out of different applications. Maybe we should have another podcast about that. But microservices and all of that, then you are really going towards taking e-commerce towards generic technology. Right now, you have the entire world who does any tech. All of those people available to do e-commerce. That you don't need to go to those niche developers. I mean, nothing against them. I'm just saying that it's a good point that we'll have a much larger pool of people who can do this stuff.
So you kind of open the door, and let's not get too deep into it, but what is composable?
Kevin, you want to take it or you want me to?
You can take it first, Ram.
Okay, composable. So if you take any e-commerce platform, right, it has different things. So the customer comes into your website, there's discovery, right? There's the search. You need to search for it and find it. There is your merchandising or your presentation of the homepage. Then there is your product page. Then there is within the product, you have suggestions. You have things like that. Then there is the checkout. All of those things, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about it, there are vendors who do all of these different parts pretty well, right? There's search. There are definitely several vendors. Even though your platform might have a default search, many people find that a third-party search, maybe with AI built in, right, is way better than that, and that has real value to the business, because if I can find what I'm looking for then I'm out of there, right? And that's, many people have found that using best of class technologies for specific features has its advantages. If you try to do all of that within a platform, then the question comes around as to why do you need the platform then, right? Why can't you just build this together from best in class vendors? So that's where the whole concept has come in, where and this is not new. Again, coming from a SaaS and those backgrounds, we've been doing this for years. We've been building microservices for each functionality and putting them together. Now, e-commerce wants to do the same thing. You want product searches separate, you want discovery separate, you want all of those things as to be separate, different services. Checkout is separate, payment is separate. It could be a third-party vendor, it could be something you write yourself. Platforms that are coming out like Commerce Tools and all of them, they have built some of it themselves. Yeah. Some of them, they allowed vendors to fulfill, right? So that's Commerce Tools. Now, talking about our conversation, we're probably running out of time, is of who should do it. I believe at this stage, that is definitely for a larger company, because you're talking about a little more money here, you're talking about a lot more money there, because you have to maintain and build and have monitoring and all of that, which a platform does for you.
Yeah,
much.
You kind of started touching on it, but it also, you touched on the merchant side, but there's also the deep tech stack, right? The content delivery network, the server-side rendering, the JavaScript framework, like all those things that a merchant doesn't necessarily care about, that all of a sudden they have to start caring about. Yeah. And then the DevOps that go into all of that. So it's like, you're right. You gotta, it's really for much larger merchants who can really staff that.
Yeah, and there are advantages if you think about scaling, right? Yeah. If you take e-commerce by the nature of it, right, I might have 1,000 people searching on my site, of which only 10 or 20 buying, maybe, right? So should I have this big infrastructure just for searching? Yeah. The composable will enable you to scale it differently. Search has a lot of power, right? It's on a server that's powerful. Checkout, not so much, because only 20 people are checking out. I don't need so much power, right? There's 1,000 people searching, so that's another advantage of that. Again, I don't want to get too much into it.
It is a whole podcast. Or a whole
exactly. Yeah. Sounds really interesting.
But it sounds like it's very niche.
I can speak about it a lot. So.
Yeah, it's very niche, though.
Which one?
It niche, the composable.
Right now, I think bigger organizations are doing it because they are the ones who are able to make that investment. And some of the platforms that have come up, no offense to them, like the e-commerce tools, and those platforms itself is really expensive, right? So, you can't even have some of the smaller merchants, justify the investment in those platforms. So as things go along, I think it's the way to go. I mean, it will happen when there'll be cheaper platforms. There'll be ways to do that. Do that yourself rather than having to go to I mean, all of these platforms essentially are orchestrators. Right? They're orchestrating the different services. So as it gets easier to orchestrate, there are orchestrating mechanisms within technology that doesn't require a specific e-commerce tool. As it gets better and more people are aware of it, I think more and more people can go that way. Yeah. Will they go? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say.
Okay. I just want to circle back a little bit on the UI UX stuff, because we've talked about different GMVs, and if we've got a GMV that's under 10 million, say, and they aren't ready to do the investment into Headless, then I just want to give some people a little bit of a takeaway of like, what could they do to better their UI UX?
One of the major things that I tend to see a lot is a lack of investment in user experience and user-centered design. I think that one of the first things any store owner can do is to invest in going over the interactions and user flows that any store is providing and seeing if that's really going to fit their user base. Is it more of to what Kevin was saying? Is your user experience providing what the user expects for that type of purchase, for that type of item? I think the very first thing they can do is start going over all of their user flows, and to simplify that, just what are the main things the user's doing there. They're searching for things, they're looking for products, they're looking at catalogs, they're looking at product listings. Maybe they're going to compare things, they're going to add things to wish lists. Any of the core functionality that your user may expect, those are the first places to put some attention towards. After that, paying attention to your research, conducting interviews, talking both to users and admins and maybe even B2B partners, anything that's going to give you an idea as to how your users use your site, how they use an admin, how they use the components, where they're spending their time. All of those things will ultimately lead to inefficiencies or things that work and things that don't. And that is the framework for where you're going to start providing new solutions. It all starts with UX.
Session recording, right?
Yeah. Session recording.
Where
Any
you
tool that you can use.
Right.
Yeah.
Where
All UX research tools.
Right. Yeah, because I know one of the things that we've done with clients in the past is implementing those types of tools just to see, where are people centering, like where's most of the attention going to, or at what point are they dropping off a page? Because then you can make minute changes at that point. You're not looking at a complete redesign or web overhaul. So, I'm just saying is, for smaller clients, that aren't looking at Headless and don't have that capability, there are still things they can do.
Absolutely.
For better conversions.
Right. That's our framework, right, honey? The way we do this is we categorize them as, how easy it is, what is the impact, what is the cost, and then we have a multiplier and we say, okay, this one's high impact and easy to do. Let's do that first. A/B testing, right? Essentially, in my opinion, what Jorge said in an elaborate and user experience centric way. But my point is, watch the user, and then make a single tweak and A/B test, right? That's how 99% of CRO is done. Now, of course, experienced designers can already say, these are the 5 things you should test first. Because somebody like me, I'm not a user experience designer. I know user experience enough from my experience, but I'm not a designer, and I might not catch that. But people can say that. But after that 3 or 4 things are done, you're essentially doing that. You're finding, looking at the user, see if there's something that you can change and test it, test it fast. If it doesn't work, throw it away, go to the next thing, right? That's kind of how CRO is really done. People may say different things about how they do it, but every one of them are going to do this. This is the only way to do it, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to time, so why don't we end it with, you guys let us know how, if someone wants to get a hold of you or your company, they have more questions or they're in need of your service, how would they do that? So let's start with Kevin.
Sure. Thanks, honey. This has been great. If somebody wants to reach me or find us, you can reach me directly, kevin@getshogun.com. Or go to our website, getshogun.com, and you can find our information there.
All right. And, Ram, Jorge, of course, we're all at atmosol, but Ram, how's the best way for someone to get a hold of us?
Yeah, our company is first initial last name at atmosol.com. So mine is rmohan at atmosol.com.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you and I am very accepting. I accept all connections mostly. So if you want to find me there, you can find me there as well.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for their time today. This was a very interesting conversation, and I hope that we can continue doing interesting conversations in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to eCommerce Insights presented by Atmosol. We hope you have learned something new or took a nugget of information away to help you as you travel the world of e-commerce. Until next time, keep asking questions, evolving your business, and learn every day.